Welcome to the Volunteer Youth Worker Podcast. Youth ministries rise and fall on the volunteers. So we are here to encourage and equip you. Join the conversation as we tackle the practical questions you are asking so you can help the next generation know Jesus.
Hey, Sid, we just came out of our conference season, and I know as we were talking with youth workers across our country of Canada, you brought up a really important thing I think volunteer youth workers need to hear, especially as it relates to potentially their calling. Do you want to fill us in on that?
Yeah, really quick. Like, Jer, we love volunteer youth workers who, have full-time jobs outside of that ministry environment they're serving in, and they're trying to figure out how to be faithful in their job and in their ministry that they're volunteering in. And we think that's beautiful. Like, praise the Lord, that's amazing. But for some of you, God might be actually pushing on you a little bit to say, hey, what would it look like for you to consider your youth ministry calling as a vocation? Not just as volunteering, that maybe this should be your job. And Jerry, we're passionate about that. Like it's not for everybody, but for some of us, the Lord might be saying, hey, I want you to lean in. And we just think that, as we praying for people, we know there's such a huge need out there that we would want to encourage you. That's something really worth exploring, talking about with other people who are in full-time ministry to really understand it, talking about with your shepherd, like whether it's someone in your point, whether she's a point leader in your youth ministry that you really trust, or whether it's one of your pastors, you should talk about it. But I'm just saying, Jared, that we need to be more intentional about praying that maybe God would have us in vocational youth ministry. And then in light of that, I think people should just know that there's some ways to get educated for it. Like some of us are thinking, man, I don't even know if I love it. I don't know if I'd have the skill set for it. And we just want to say, hey, just know there's a lot of institutions that are finding ways to train and equip youth workers without causing them to have to leave their local environment. Our coalition is one of those where you can stay working in your local environment, get great academic engagement and rigor, be in a community, learn the skills, get mentored and shepherded without having to leave home, if you will. And we're just saying, don't let that be a barrier if you're thinking about it, because we think there's great ways to move forward on it.
Yeah, not only that, but there's actually, there's so many places across our country of Canada that are looking for youth workers. There's jobs that aren't going filled. So there's a huge need. And then there's a lot of places that are even willing to house and hold on to somebody that's training to be in this field and can still be engaged locally. So, when we built the coalition program, or when Marv started it, the heart was it's spend the time doing local ministry as a job while also training for it. That's really important.
Yeah. So we're just saying, hey, pray about it and talk to us if you're considering it. No one's forcing anything, but we'd sure love to be in the conversation to help you in the discerning process. And that's where our heart is. So love that.
Yeah, we put the details in the show notes. And then, honestly, as a Master of Arts program, you get a chance to accomplish Master of Arts, or, 2 years towards a bachelor's degree. It's a great, great option. And so, yeah, check that out. And if you got any questions, of course, we'd love to have that conversation with you. And even if you're in ministry and you want to level up and go with that master's program, Coalition's a great chance, great opportunity for it. So we'd love to chat with you. All right, Sid. Big question for us today. As youth workers, what should and shouldn't we share from our own spiritual journey? So we're think about people listening. They're on their way to their youth ministry. They're volunteering. They've got a small group of students that they're investing into. And our own spiritual journey is certainly something where we have, hopefully, I guess we're kind of assuming.
I guess we're making an assumption here, right? Like if you're doing, hey, listen, if you're a youth worker who's helping kids fall in love with Jesus, we would call that discipleship. We assume that you have a relationship with Jesus, right? Like,
yeah. And if you don't, we will lead you to Christ in another episode.
Amen. We're going to do the gospel message here right away. This could be great. Let's get our good friends from Billy Graham on, and they can maybe just walk us through.
Mark Miller.
That'd be great.
Mark Miller will preach. Yes, we'll put you on a Zoom call. You can come to Christ and then come back to this podcast episode.
Okay, so here's the deal. If you're a youth worker in a church, but you're not a Christian, could you let us know? We'd love to connect you with somebody.
My info's in the show notes.
It's going to be amazing. Yeah.
Okay, but then when we think about discipling students, oftentimes stuff comes up. It's in the conversations or the small group questions where you're like, oh, what parts of my journey and my following Christ, because you can think about your own experience in the questions and so on. What parts should you share? And are there parts to your own spiritual journey you shouldn't?
Man, that's so smart. So I've been thinking about this a little bit, like just in terms of like stage of life stuff, right? Like I'm at a different Jer, we all talk about it. Sid's getting old. Don't have kids in the home. My freedom to do different spiritual practices or rhythms is very different than it was even 3 years ago. And when I talk to my friends who have little kids, I'm not placing my rhythms on them because we're at different stages of life. So I think that applies here to some degree.
Yeah.
So here's the first thing. I think that we absolutely should be talking with our students about the spiritual disciplines that we're engaging in that's helping us grow in our love for Jesus and our love for others, right? So we know Timothy tells us that we should train ourselves to be godly. Physical training has some value. Spiritual training, it has value now for eternity. We should share the practices that we're doing with our kids. But Jared, here's what I think we should do. When we share the practices, we shouldn't assume that our students will do all the practices we're doing in the same way, but we should be modeling for them that we're practicing.
Okay. So we should share the practices, or at least talk about the.
Absolutely.
And so when you say practices, just describe for people what that can look like, or what they, because they're doing it, but just what do you mean by that?
Sure. So let's do it right now, right here for us. So for me and you, we each have different rhythms. I get up early in the morning. I read my Bible. I journal my prayer. And then I'll do some deeper study through a commentary online. I should talk about that with my students. I should go, you guys, this is what's God's using to change my life right now. You should figure out ways to like get into the scriptures and pray and do some good reading. So what I'm trying to do is I'm sharing that these are the things I'm doing. Then I'm giving some room to say, hey, what could that look like for you? Like, I'm taking, like right now, I don't have any kids at home, Jared, so I get to spend like an hour and a half in the morning doing this. Well, most of our students, that is unattainable. What could good practice look like for our kids in 10 minutes? Do you know what I mean? So I want to be careful that we're not placing like a burden or weight on our kids that they just can't live up to, and this actually becomes an experience of defeat as opposed to an invitation to something more, right? So that's where I think we should be careful when it comes to practices. And then the other thing, Jared, that while I really believe that when it comes to our spiritual disciplines, they're rooted in Scripture, that's always like a part of it. That prayer is always a part of it. Probably in some way, community is a part of it. But the way that we like engage those might be unique or different, and we should be offering our students different ways of doing it as well. So, for me, I might say journaling right now, but maybe for a kid, it's an acronym. Remember when we did the prayer acronym, ACT UP, Adoration, Confession, Thanksgiving? Great, let's do that. That's not what I do, but anything to get them praying, anything to get them in the Word, anything to get them in community, let's do that. So we should share
good,
practices.
But the practices should be personal. So don't just share ideas like, hey, you should do this. When you're thinking about your own spiritual journey, what we're saying is speak out of your experience. Hey, this last week when I was meeting with my small group, I came to the realization, hey, I should be open about this particular thing. The group was encouraging to me. Whatever the story or the experience was, make it the personal thing so that they're connecting with, go ahead.
Yeah. And let me try this one for size 2, Jer. Also, I think it's okay to share about your struggle engaging your practices. Now, notice I'm not talking about like your struggle with sin here. I'm saying about the journey with practices. So be careful that you don't have to position yourself as perfect, because again, then kids won't be able to measure up and they'll quit before they get going. So I think it's also good to say, hey, I got to be honest with you. This week, I was tired. I had a hard time. I read my Bible like 3 times or 2 times. But next week, I'm trying to lean in a little bit more. Like, don't just share what practices you do, but also share the journey of engaging your practices. I think that's another thing that could be really helpful for students.
Yes. And then recognize if there is a season where you're sharing just, man, I haven't read my Bible in the last 3 months. Maybe there's a chance that there's a different conversation you want to have elsewhere. So, the goal is, hey, as shepherds, as volunteers that we're getting to shepherd our students, that we might be people that are able to guide and students can follow us as we follow Jesus. So, if you're off the path, then that's a different conversation once again.
Yeah, there might be that passage from Ephesians that says, don't let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouth, but only that which is helpful for building others up. Like, dude, don't share with them the fact that you're not even sure you're a follower of Jesus right now. That's just not helpful for your grade 6, kids as they're journey.
Okay, so that's really helpful. So then there are things that we shouldn't share. So we should share. This is just very straight, like very basic. We're doing a quick one here.
But get after it, people. Yeah.
But share, and this is good. This is very specific. Your practices, the way you engage with your practices.
Yeah.
That's what you should share about your spiritual journey. What are some of the things you should not share?
Well, hey, let's do this. So those are practices. Let's talk about experiences. So it's one thing to talk about the practices we do. It's another thing to talk about the experiences that we've had with Jesus. And here's what I mean by that. I think like we've all been given different gifts. Do you know what I mean? Like we've all been given different spiritual gifts. 1 Peter chapter 4 tells us that we've all been given different gifts used to serve others. We shouldn't assume that the gift we have is a gift everyone else should have. And so we shouldn't push on it. Like, dude, you really need to go get that gift of speaking because that's like my gift, and we should all get that. In the same way, we should be aware of how of some of our experiences we have with the Lord. Here's a personal example. My wife has had more what I would call like intimate interactions with God where he speaks to her, like pretty directive. And I'm like, that's not really my jam. Like I'm wrestling in the word. He's growing my awareness and understanding of who he is and how we work. But it's very rare where I feel like God says, hey, this is what I need you to do now. And yet I think Jen has more of those. So if Jen kept coming to me and saying, man, God spoke to me yesterday, where are you at? Like you really need him to speak to you. And I'd be done. Like it's just not happening. And the danger is I'd start pursuing an experience as opposed to pursuing God. And so I think, Jer, when it comes to our experiences that we have, we should just be aware to make sure that we're inviting our students to follow after Jesus, not the experiences that Jesus may or may not bring. And I think that's an important distinction there.
Oh, that's a really big distinction. That's fascinating because I think as volunteers or just as Christians generally, we often wrestle with that. We assume that the way we experience our faith is the way that everybody either should or that they should lean into or that they should. So the idea that we would be cautious, and I mean, we're saying it kind of strongly, like, hey, you should share your practices. You shouldn't share your experiences. Obviously, you don't temper that, but like, that's a fair thing just to put a little caution in on. Again, you should share your experiences with like your own small group, your own community, you know, and like celebrate and whatnot. But when we're thinking about the students that are trying to actually replicate us or look to us as kind of examples, I like the idea of being cautious about sharing our own experiences.
Well, and one of the things that you might want to bring up, like, so first of all, I'm aware that there's kind of dark seasons of the soul, where like we're just trusting in faith that Jesus is with us, even though it doesn't feel like we're having an intimate experience. And the scriptures are so clear that just because we don't feel that intimate experience, it does not mean that Jesus is not intimately with us. Like he never leaves us, he never forsakes us. So I think that's why it's important for us to be aware of how we nuance the conversations. I think we could ask a question, hey, this is how I've been experiencing Jesus. What's one way you've experienced him that's different than mine? You know, like that's a great way to invite kids into a conversation and explore that. So, Jared, we've talked about like practices, we've talked about experiences. And then I think you've already referenced it, but we should also think about like maybe failings and successes in terms of our morality. Like that's another conversation altogether. That's a little bit different than this. But of course, we're really aware that our stage of life, so for many of you, you're young adults, or maybe you're an older volunteer, what you're working through and wrestling with as far as your personal issues are very different than what like a grade 7 or 8 student might be. And so just be really careful about the specifics of your journey that you invite them into, because it just might not be helpful for them at the stage of life where they're at.
Yeah, and let's just use a really clear example because I remember this as a high school guy, having a small group leader. You were talking about like, hey, here's some of our personal struggles. Here's like the, classic guy conversation, guys accountability. Here's some, sexual sin that, we're processing, thinking about. And then like the volunteer comes in and is like, guys, I know exactly what you're going through. Here's my list of things that I'm dealing with, wrestling with. And we're like, whoa, this is a little bit much.
Easy, big shooter.
Yeah. And so just volunteers know that even where your students are maybe crossing paths with experiences that you've had or things that you've struggled with, it's not necessarily the time to jump in and say, I'm exactly where you are and think that that's actually helpful for their journey. I don't think it is.
Jared, hey, we know, like Paul, we should carry the burden of responsibility to say to our students to some degree, follow me as I follow Jesus. Like it's actually appropriate for us and our lives matter so much, but we should have a lot of wisdom in how we do that. And if you're wondering, that's why you have people that are over you, whether it's your like point leader in your youth ministry, an older, more mature volunteer, or maybe your pastor in your church. Like, that's why we go to those people if we're unsure, to help get a little bit of direction, so that we can like best steward what God's asked us to steward when it comes to shepherding these kids He's placed in our care, man. Love it.
Yeah. That's good. All right. So to quickly recap, you should share your practices. We're saying that's a great thing. Your engagement with them. Let's be cautious. Let's not share so much our experiences and some of these big wins and big losses. And where you're concerned or you've got questions or you want to push back, we'd love to hear from you. We put our contact info in the show notes, but you also have point leaders. You can feel free to chat with them and talk through it. But let's just be a little bit thoughtful about how we share our own spiritual journey with our students.